Modern geopolitical anxiety often centers on a single, terrifying historical comparison. The relationship between the United States and China is caught in what foreign policy circles call the Thucydides Trap. Popularized by political scientist Graham Allison, the theory states that when a rapidly rising power instills fear in a status quo power, the resulting structural stress makes a systemic war inevitable. This entire paradigm rests on the authority of an ancient Greek historian who supposedly documented this exact mechanical phenomenon 2,400 years ago during the Peloponnesian War. But the modern Thucydides trap relies on a flawed translation of his text, paired with a deeply sanitized timeline of how the Athenian Empire actually formed. Athens did not slowly slide from leading a defensive coalition against Persia into an accidental empire. They rapidly and violently subjugated their own allies. By deconstructing the true historical timeline of Athenian economic extortion, we can see exactly how systemic conflicts actually ignite. Misreading the origins of the Peloponnesian War causes modern superpowers to prepare for the wrong triggers of conflict, blinding diplomats to the real decisions that cause catastrophic wars. The orthodox view among historians is that Athens grew into an empire gradually, with the critical shift occurring late in the timeline, when they signed the Peace of Callias with Persia in 449 BCE. The logic assumes that once the Persian threat was gone, the alliance lost its purpose, leaving Athens to tighten its grip over the Aegean. Thucydides outlines a very different sequence. He shows Athens aggressively stripping its allies of their autonomy decades earlier. Less than 10 years into the alliance, the city of Naxos tried to leave. Athens responded by besieging and enslaving the city, a direct violation of established Greek principles of autonomy. Shortly after, the Athenian military dealt a crushing blow to the Persian navy at the Eurymedon River, effectively erasing the naval threat to the Aegean. With the sea secured, Athens immediately turned its weapons on the island of Thassus. They besieged the island to seize control of highly lucrative gold mines, a dispute completely detached from mutual defense. The defensive alliance against Persia was a convenient cover. Athens engineered an imperial apparatus almost immediately to fuel its own rapid economic expansion. If Athens was the birthplace of democracy, we have to ask how its citizens justified the meek egotism of enslaving their own partners. The justification started with autochthonous pride. Athenians believed they were indigenous to their land, making them superior to other Greeks and the true saviors of the Hellenic world. They contrasted this self-image with a deep prejudice against their primary allies, the Ionian Greeks who inhabited the islands and the coast of modern-day Turkey. By the 5th century, a pervasive stereotype held that Ionians were lovers of luxury, undisciplined, unmanly, and politically fragile. This fed an intense Athenian paranoia known as metism, the belief that if the Ionians were left to govern themselves, they would simply surrender to the Persian Empire at the first sign of pressure. This cultural chauvinism provided the perfect rationalization. Athens convinced itself it was forcing the weak Ionians to be free, intentionally destabilizing local governments to impose their own authority across the Aegean. Ideology provides the excuse, but maintaining hegemony requires massive, sustained capital. This map tracks the economic lifeblood of the Mediterranean. Athens relied heavily on maritime trade, especially grain flowing through the Bosporus. To secure it, Athens took a radical step in 454 BCE, moving the massive allied treasury from Delos to their own Acropolis. This formalized the extraction. The annual tribute, the phoros, that allies paid for mutual defense was now explicitly appropriated to fund Athenian domestic priorities. That stolen wealth financed massive public works, including the Parthenon, turning the Acropolis into a monument of imperial branding built on allied money. Then they tightened the grip with the Coinage Decree, an instrument designed to establish a total economic monopoly. The decree forced allied states to melt down their local currencies and exclusively use Athenian weights, measures, and silver coins. Disobeying this strict mandate carried severe penalties. Citizens who minted their own money lost their legal rights and faced total property confiscation. To understand how this economic extraction eventually ignited the Peloponnesian War, we have to look closely at Thucydides' own words. This comparison of translations shows the divergence. The popular Rex Warner text claims, "What made war inevitable was the growth of Athenian power." But classicists point to a much more accurate translation by Raphael Seeley. The critical Greek phrase here is tous Athenaios. The text actually says it was the Athenians themselves, through specific contingent actions, who compelled the Spartans to fight. It was not an abstract, inevitable shift in power. The geopolitical baseline of the 5th century was dangerous. The Greek world was highly polarized, split into two rival alliance networks constantly vying for influence. Within that tense environment, Athens made three active choices. First, they allied with Corcyra specifically to defeat Sparta's top naval ally, Corinth, at sea. Second, they issued the Megarian Decree, weaponizing trade embargoes to economically strangle another crucial Spartan ally. Third, Athens launched a brutal siege against Potidæa, a city culturally tied to Corinth, designed to crush Corinthian influence in the region. Sparta did not attack out of some ambient fear of a rising power. They were dragged into the conflict by Corinth, whose vital interests were being systematically dismantled by Athenian aggression. Systemic wars do not ignite because a status quo power is afraid of an upstart. They ignite when aggressive actors corner their rivals by relentlessly attacking proxy allies. The modern geopolitical paradigm assumes a rising power terrifies an established power into a clash. Dismantling that simplistic view reveals a more accurate historical model. The true drivers of conflict are economic extraction, cultural bias, and proxy flashpoints, locked within rigid, polarized alliances. Applying the flawed Graham Allison version of the Thucydides Trap to modern relations between the United States and China is actively dangerous. Believing that war is an impersonal, structural inevitability creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. It provides an intellectual excuse for diplomatic failures. If there is a lesson in Thucydides, it is that catastrophic war is always a choice. It is engineered by polarizing alliances, weaponizing economics, and letting the tail of lesser allies wag the dog of superpowers.